Hey guys, Bartel's Bookshelf here with my latest recent reads video. I find these easier to do than monthly wrap-ups at the end of every month, because then I'm not talking about like 5, 10, 15 books in one go. It's easier for me to just kind of pace them out and talk about them as I read them every 3 or 4 books or so. I'm obviously starting off from the stuff that I've most recently finished, so I will be talking about some sequels that I read, but I won't be talking about the previous books in the series because I read those before this. So yeah, my first recent reads video since coming back to YouTube, so I hope you guys enjoy. First I have Firestarter by Tara Sim. This is the 3rd book in the Timekeeper trilogy. So obviously, being that this is the final book in a series, I can't really tell you too much about the plot, but I will tell you a little bit about the premise and just kind of generally what I thought of this book. So this is a YA fantasy romance series that takes place in an alternate steampunk Victorian England, where we have like automobiles and things like that, and airships and whatnot. Typical steampunk stuff. But in this world, The whole world is run by these magical clock towers that basically keep time running. So if something happens to one of the towers, if it breaks down or if the tower is destroyed, the town that that clock tower sort of oversees is stopped or frozen in time. And the first book deals with a teenage boy named Danny, who he's I believe the youngest working clockwork mechanic. Normally you have to go through a lot more schooling and stuff to become a mechanic, but he's one of the youngest. He goes to the town of Enfield to repair a clock, and he meets this mysterious golden boy, blonde-haired teenage boy in the Enfield clock tower, and it turns out that this is Colton, who is the clock spirit of this tower. And there's a slow sort of realization in the first book about all of these differing clock spirits that exist. They were sort of thought to be myths, but Danny meets Colton face to face, and they end up engaging in a romantic relationship. So there's gay themes as well. I read the first book off of my friend Nakia, Plot Twists recommendation, like 2 years ago, because she read it and she just loved it and kept telling me about it, and I read it and I really, really enjoyed it. And I meant to get to the other 2 books sooner, but I was just, I don't know. I'm really bad about finishing series, and sometimes I can take like years to read the next book in a series. I think it has to do with my ADHD brain. If I spend too much time on one thing, I get kind of bored and I need like something totally different. But I borrowed the second book from my friend Laura, who also read the series off of Nakia's recommendation and adored them. So I borrowed the second book, and about a week or 2 ago, I finally read the second book, and I loved it, and I just flew through it. And immediately after finishing it, I was like, I need to borrow the third book. So Nakia lent me her copy. So this is Plot Twist's copy of the third book, Firestarter. As I said, I don't want to say too much about the plot because this is the third in a trilogy. So anything I reveal would be spoiling it. But I'll just sort of talk generally about what I thought of this book and the series as a whole. The first book was definitely my favorite. The first book is beautifully written. It has some wonderful sort of winsome philosophy about the passage of time and how we want what we can't get back and stuff like that. This desire to change things that can't be changed. I thought the gay romance at the center of it was really cute, really adorable. Danny's kind of like a little bookish and shy, and Colton is a little bit more forthcoming, a little bit more blunt, because he's a clock spirit. He doesn't really have social mores or anything like that, and so they're just really cute together. And the second and third books get more into the mystery of the clock towers, why they were built, how they were built, and a lot of other stuff. The sequels become much more plot heavy, but both to its detriment and to its benefit, I think, because while I really enjoyed a lot of the plotting in these books, I felt like, especially in this book, there's so much going on. There's so many characters and subplots and sort of intersecting desires on the part of like all these different sort of factions of characters, that I feel like a lot of the heart of the first book sort of gets lost in the shuffle. It's a bit messy. It's a bit all over the place, but it's still very well written. And in my opinion, I thought just the romance was so beautiful. I was feeling a little bit not uninterested, but towards the end of this book, obviously, as you would expect to happen in the climax of a YA series, there's a lot of big sort of action moments. And there isn't really any of that in the first book. That's really more of in the sequels. They become more action oriented, and this one especially, there's a big action climax. And I was a little bit like about that, because that's not really. I'm not a big fan of just like action and stuff, especially not coming out of a very sort of insular and introspective story. So I was feeling a little bit meh about it. But then there's a whole section after that focuses exclusively on the relationship between Colton and Danny, and just the way that was done and the resolution of that sort of plot thread and everything, I just thought was so beautiful. It was so lovely. It made me like tear up a little bit. So yeah, I mean, if you like steampunk, if you like YA fantasy, if you like sort of time stuff involving time, if you like queer love stories, I would recommend the first book especially. And the good thing about the first book actually is that you can it pretty much stands on its own. I mean, there's lingering plot threads that, as I mentioned, are addressed in the sequels, but you can really just read it as its own thing. But I would recommend the full series just to see how everything resolves. I think it's very beautifully done, and I have a few more of Tara Sim's books that I really want to read. Laura's already read almost everything of Tara Sim. She hasn't been publishing too long. I think the first Timekeeper novel came out in 2016, I believe, and she's got a duology, and she's got another series that she's working on right now. But yeah, based on this series, I really like her stuff. I love her emphasis on queer characters and queer love stories and stuff. So I hope to read more of her stuff and enjoy it. So yeah, that's Firestarter by Tara Sim. Next, I read something a little bit different, although it's still a queer love story, surprisingly, or a queer novel, a gay novel. This is Like People in History by Felice Picano. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. This is touted as a gay American epic, and indeed, Felice Picano was part of the influential Violet Quill group of gay authors, people like Edmund White and Andrew Holleran, both who have blurbs on this book. So yeah, Edmund White, of course, wrote A Boy's Own Story and stuff like that. Andrew Holleran wrote Dancer from the Dance, both very influential gay books. And similarly with Felice Picano, this seems to be his most influential work. I had read a short story of his a long time ago in an anthology of gay noir stories called Men of the Mean Streets, I believe. I'll put up a graphic here. And I really, really liked it. It was a sci-fi story called Imago Blue that's about a female detective who's killed, and then her body she's like resurrected sort of in a male body, and so it's about her kind of dealing with that and becoming a man and stuff. And I thought that was really well done. So I'd always remembered that story, and I'd always remembered this author's name. And then I found out about this, which, as I said, is touted as a gay American epic. In fact, that's Edmund White's blurb there on the front says, "This is the big novel we've all been waiting for, the gay Gone with the Wind." And there is similarities there. It's a big chunky book. It's a little over 500 pages, and this book deals with sort of gay history, 20th century gay history, through the main characters of the story, which is Roger Sansark and his cousin Alastair Dodge, who he meets as a young boy in 1954, and the book kind of follows their relationship and the progression of their lives through decades and through a lot of monumental sort of eras of gay history. As I said, this begins in 1954. It goes all the way through Stonewall, through Woodstock. It goes through the 70s with sort of the gay liberation movement, and sort of the sort of free love of sort of pre-AIDS. And then, of course, it deals pretty heavily with AIDS itself, with the AIDS crisis. And then there's a wraparound story set in the modern day, or at least 1991. This book was published in 1995. That's about, and this isn't a spoiler because they establish this very early on. It's about that deals with Roger meeting Alastair at his 45th birthday party with his young boyfriend, and Alastair has been diagnosed with AIDS and is slowly dying from it, and basically he as a sort of birthday present, Roger brings him some Tuinals to kill himself with. And so that event in the present and his dealings with Alistair and his boyfriend and stuff basically get him to sort of reminisce about his life with his cousin, and as I said, we kind of go through all these different eras as we explore that. And yeah, I really loved this book. I was surprised, like how I mean, not surprised, because like I said, I read that short story by Felice Picano, and I really liked it. But yeah, this really is a big gay American epic. There's a real sort of a verisimilitude to it in how it depicts these various eras. The characters feel very real, very lived in. The dialogue. The dialogue is like really funny. That was actually one of the things that surprised me about this, because you would expect, or I guess it's kind of a stereotype that a lot of gay novels and gay stories tend to be very sad. And don't get me wrong, there is a lot of sad moments in this, obviously, but it's also really funny. Roger and especially Alistair are really witty, and they're always making sort of all these pithy bon mots to each other. And there's just this kind of dry humor to it that I really enjoyed. Just the way that Picano explores all of these different gay communities, like Fire Island in the 1970s, sort of the New York magazine, the New York sort of gay magazine scene, theater, all that stuff. It just feels very it rings true with a lived experience, and I was enthralled with these characters and their stories. As I mentioned in my Quatrefoil review, I think it's important as gay people, as LGBTQ plus people, to explore our history and to learn more about it and to sort of see where we came from, And I think this did a very good job of doing that and of depicting all these various eras of gay history. And it also has a very poignant love story between Roger and this Vietnam veteran named Matt Logudice, Load Your Dice, I think is how you pronounce it. They talk about how to pronounce it in the book. They say it's pronounced Load Your Dice, so Load Your Dice. It's an Italian name. Yeah, he's an injured Vietnam War vet, and it's about a big part of the book is about their burgeoning relationship and their intertwining relationship with Alistair. And I thought that was very well done, very very poignant, very I don't want to say bitter, but it's very it felt very real to me. It's not all sunshine and gay rainbows. They really deal with a lot of harsh and tough things and emotions in this book, and I really liked that. And the way that their relationship, Matt and Roger's relationship, resolves in the book, I thought was just so beautiful and incredibly emotional and very painful, but just so well written. I felt like it really tapped into that sense of like brotherhood that exists in the gay community, even among people that we don't necessarily like. There's this sense of like kind of, well, we're stuck with each other, kind of thing. And I thought this did a really good job of depicting that. And one other thing I really liked was, as I mentioned, a lot of the cultural details rang true. And I especially liked once it gets to the late 70s, especially, where Felice Picano drops a bunch of references to his fellow Violet Quill authors, like Edmund White, Andrew Holleran, Christopher Cox, Michael Grumley. So yeah, that was really cool and just kind of a nice little in-joke. So yeah, there was just it's very dense, it's very detailed, but it's not tough to read. It flows beautifully. The writing is witty and gorgeous at the same time. Very emotional, very poignant. I'm repeating myself, but I really enjoyed this, and I really enjoyed just how it all ended, how everything wrapped up. I really enjoyed it, and I really want to read more of Felice Picano's stuff after this. In fact, actually, after finishing this, I bought a bunch more of his books, one of which is a gay space opera novel, I believe, called The Dry Land. I have it somewhere. I'll put up a picture. But, if you like sort of gay novels, novels about queer characters and exploring queer history in a very poignant but very funny and sort of a hopeful way, I loved this, and I think you will too. Highly recommended. And the third book I read for these recent reads was In Between Dragons by Michael Kandel. Kandel, I think. Kandel? I don't know how you pronounce it. This was just a random find at Half Price Books. I saw the cover, and I knew I wanted to read it. And then I read the back, and I knew I definitely wanted to read it, because this is about a young teenage boy named Sherman Potts, who is able to phase into different realities, one of which is this world called McGulvey Land, which is run by this sort of mysterious recluse named Mr. McGulvey. And he has this magic library full of books that basically allow one to jump into different worlds and sort of have adventures in the stories of those novels. So the entirety of this book is basically this very experimental, sort of witty jaunt between all the different adventures that Sherman, or Sherm for short, is going on, and how that all kind of ties into his personal life in the real world, or in his world. So yeah, I knew nothing about this, but I loved the cover, and the premise really intrigued me, so I checked it out, and I was surprised. I really enjoyed it. I looked up Michael Kandel while I was reading the book, and it turns out, because I thought his name sounded familiar, so I looked him up, and it turns out he was actually a translator for a lot of Eastern European science fiction, including a bunch of acclaimed translations of various Stanislaw Lem novels and collections, one of which I actually have, the Siberiad. So once I found that out, I was like, oh, okay. And yeah, you can, from what I've read of him and of his translations of Stanislaw Lem, they're very much about wordplay and sort of clever sort of tricks and stuff. Very sort of jaunty and kind of puckish, and this book definitely has that in spades. It's very dry, very witty, and as I said, very experimental, because it's split up. So the chapters themselves are really long, but there's all these sub-chapters, going up to like 12, 17, there's all these tiny little sub-chapters, and each one of those sub-chapters is a chapter of it taking place in one of the adventures that Sherm is participating in, and they're all really like weird and imaginative, and very clearly like kind of playing off of like common fantasy tropes, like the one with the dragons that this is depicting is This it's kind of like our world, with cars and radios and electricity and all that stuff. But the world is being attacked by dragons who have like toxic breath, and they give off like radiation and stuff like that. And in this story, Sherm plays a knight basically who has to slay these dragons. But instead of your typical medieval knight with plate armor and riding a horse and stuff, they wear these like sort of like carbon fiber, like plastic outfits that resist the fumes, and instead of riding steeds, they ride like beat up old muscle cars and stuff, and the dragons can like disguise themselves as humans and stuff like that, and they all speak like Italian for some reason, just very 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 strange. And another one, for example, is a sort of a sci-fi story that's kind of playing on like pulp 1950s stories with a mix of like a little bit of like the paranormal detective genre, where Sherm is playing this like psychic sort of investigator guy, who's fighting these evil psi-fiends from Dimension X who are trying to convert everyone to communism, so there's a lot of like humor arising out of that, out of this sort of like outdated 1950s notion of like the communists are coming, and it's just very fun, very silly, and the sort of crux of the book, the inciting incident, is in Sherm's real life, he's dealing with problems with girls, of course, as a lot of teenage boys do, and so in order to kind of like learn more about women, he steals a paperback porn novel and he slips it into Mr. McGulvey's library, and things kind of start going crazy from there, and that's where these things come in, these sort of incredibly sexy cat women who kind of flit throughout all the stories and kind of like wreak havoc, and who are so incredibly, unbelievably attractive, so perfectly shaped that even just looking at them makes you cum immediately in your pants. So that gives you an idea of like the kind of humor that this book is dealing with. So yeah, it's a very short book. It's only about 181 pages. I wouldn't say it's like a major work by any means. It ends a little bit abruptly. I feel like it could have been resolved a little bit more cleanly, but it's a lot of fun. It's really silly. Michael Kandel is clearly he clearly knows his stuff. He's able to kind of ape the various styles of all these differing stories really well. As I said, it's just very dry and witty. It kind of has a vibe of like a little bit of like Terry Pratchett or something like that, or maybe a little bit of like Piers Anthony. It's in that kind of mode, I would say, but with a much more experimental style, and a lot more just very unusual, and I really liked that about it. It was very strange and imaginative, and did a lot of crazy things in a very short amount of time, and I really enjoyed that. Aside from his work as a translator, I don't think Michael Kandel published a lot of novels. I think there's 4 listed in here, or something like that. I can't remember. But this is his second novel. His first was Strange Invasion. So if I can find any more of his novels, I'll definitely be checking those out. And as I mentioned, I have one of his translations of Stanislaw Lem, so I definitely need to read that sometime soon. I've actually heard that he's considered one of the best translators of Lem into English, which is awesome. So I can definitely kind of see how they fit together based on this book. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. So yeah, not major or anything, but just a fun little diversion. I liked it a lot. It's just really nice to read something kind of light and fun, but also very like intelligent and well written, and clearly like knows what it's talking about, you know. So yeah, really enjoyed that. In Between Dragons by Michael Kandel. I don't know. Sorry. And finally, I love ending on a 5-star read, and yeah, this just completely came out of left field. This is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. And again, this is just a totally random find in half price in the YA section. Never heard of this book, never heard of this author before, but I read it and I was just completely blown away. I guess this is quite popular because I was looking on Goodreads and it's got like almost 100,000 ratings, but I'd never heard of it, so you know, it's just one of those things, again, where I read the premise, and I read a little bit of the first page just to kind of get the vibe of the writing, and I was intrigued. So this is actually a bit similar to In Between Dragons in that it deals with stories crossing over into our world, and I love stuff like that, so that was what intrigued me. And this is the story of Alice, who has spent most of her life on the run with her mom, moving from place to place, trying to escape the bad luck, as they put it. Her mother is the daughter of this famous author named Althea Proserpine, who in the 70s published this incredibly well-regarded piece of collection of dark, creepy fairy tales called Tales from the Hinterland. And she's gained kind of a cult following from that. But ever since then, she's kind of been shut up in her decaying mansion, the Hazelwood. And Alice has never known her. She's only heard stories about her and read some magazine articles and stuff. She's never read Tales from the Hinterland. She doesn't know anything about it. All she knows is that her mom and her are constantly on the move. Things always seem to go wrong for them. But her mom decides to marry up to kind of improve her station in life. Soon after, her mother is kidnapped by someone who claims to be a character from Tales from the Hinterland. And so the crux of the bulk of this book is about Alice trying to rescue her mother from the Hazelwood, from the Hinterland. So yeah, I don't want to give away too much because there's quite a few twists and turns in this, and I loved where it ended up. But man, this book was incredible. It's exactly the sort of thing I love. It's dark, creepy, sort of a noirish fairy tales, kind of in the vein of something like Angela Carter. You know, a little bit of like Shirley Jackson. In fact, they actually name drop Angela Carter in this book, and it's very atmospheric and creepy and gothic, and like one of the interesting things that I liked about it was that you never actually read any of the stories in Tales from the Hinterland in this book. You only hear recollections from some other people, or like little bits and bobs, little lines here and there to kind of fill in the blanks, and they're deliciously dark and creepy and twisted in that grand old Brothers Grimm tradition, and it recreates that writing style beautifully. The thing that really sold me on this book was the writing. The writing is gorgeous, drop dead gorgeous. And as I said, very sort of Angela Carter, sort of mixed with like Neil Gaiman. It has like some Coraline vibes a little bit, and yeah, it's very poetic and just I was floored by how fucking amazing the writing was. The prose style, it was just so deliciously dark and poetic and beautiful, and I love that. I love that mixing of darkness and beauty, of just and I love anything involving creepy fairy tales. And one of the things that I also really liked about the writing style is that she very cleverly weaves in a lot of references to other authors, because Alice, of course, is a bookworm, and yeah, they mention, as I said, Angela Carter, a few female writers that I'd never heard of, like Lonnie Moore or Laurie Moore, I think. They mention Leah Francesca Bloch, the author of the Wheatsy Bat books, which I know Eve is a big fan of, and I actually have the omnibus of that, and I really need to read that at some point. So yeah, it's one of those things where it clearly wears its influences on its sleeve, but it becomes its own thing. And again, like I can't get into too much of the actual plot because I don't want to spoil anything, but it went into some really interesting, really unusual directions, and the way that everything resolved. It has that beautiful fairy tale vibe of where things are kind of bittersweet. Things don't really end. We always say happily ever after, but we all know that in actual fairy tales, in the dark ones, things very rarely work out completely happily for everyone. And so it really captures that just very, just very poisonous, oily, viney, gothic feeling of dark, creepy, disturbing fairy tales. No Disney stuff here, and I loved that about it, and I loved how everything wrapped up. And of course, I found out afterward, looking it up, that it's a duology. So I ordered the second book, but I will say this stands alone pretty well. It leaves a few little things unanswered, but all of the main plot points are resolved in this book, so you don't necessarily need to read the second book. But I was so enamored by this, so floored by it, I immediately am going to read the second book. And also, I found out Melissa Albert recently, I believe 2021, published the actual Tales from the Hinterland book of stories. She actually wrote them and published them, and I mean, The Bloody Chamber, Angela Carter is one of my favorite writers, so it basically sounds like that kind of vibe. So I'm all over that. I ordered that too, so I'm definitely going to be reading that, and it's illustrated as well, so I'm really excited about that. So yeah, I mean, this is a very specific type of book for a very specific type of person, but if you love that kind of like dark fairy tale fantasy things of, as I said, Neil Gaiman, Angela Carter, even Cornelia Funke's Inkheart, there's a little bit of that as well, just that kind of stuff. I cannot recommend this highly enough. This was so good. Alice is just such a great character, and the way Melissa Albert handles her emotional sort of journey and her feelings toward her mom and her grandmother, and just, God, it's so beautiful and it's so well done, and I can't sing the praise of this book enough. So much so that I'm rambling and I'm all over the place, but I just want to bring across just how much I adored this book. And if it sounds at all up your alley, read it. It is so good. It's a YA novel. Big-ish print. It's a quick read. I read it in like 2 or 3 days. But it's not dumbed down for a younger audience at all. In fact, there were times where, as I was reading it, where I was like, is this really for kids? Because there's some like pretty adult themes, and there's like cussing and stuff like that. But as I've learned over my exploration of more YA literature over the past few years, thanks to Nakia and Laura, YA doesn't really mean anything. But anyway, this definitely, I don't know, like this could have been sold as an adult novel, I think, if you just aged up the protagonist, maybe. But yeah, just so good. Dark fairy tale vibes. Please read it. I loved it, and I guess I'm preaching to the choir because, as I said, this got like 90,000 ratings on Goodreads, so a lot of people probably have read this, but I'd never heard of it, and I was just man, I was just floored and I adored it. So yeah, please, if you come away from this video interested in wanting to read only one of these books, this is the one. This is the 5-star read. I just can't recommend it highly enough. So yeah, that's The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert, and that's my final recent read for this video. So yeah, pretty long as a lot of my recent read videos are. This is why I don't do monthly wrap-ups, because if I did everything at the very end of the month, then these videos would be like an hour long. But hopefully you enjoyed. If you've read any of these books, let me know. If there's anything else along these lines, anything you want to recommend to me, I read pretty much anything. I'll read anything once, is what I always say. So, yeah, just let me know. What did you think of these books? Which ones are you interested in? Talk to me about books. That's what we're here for. That's why I make these videos. That's why I came back to YouTube. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.